again, the testing is not accurate. Here in the school in Virginia, we test and include everybody in public education. As far as homework, I think homework should be minimal. I think it should be to refresh and strengthen what the teacher did during the workday. I don't think it should be 2 and 3 hours. I don't think it should be something that mom and dad do. I think it should be just for that student to refresh what they went over a little bit, to have discipline, but mainly just to work on strengths. And I think that it should not have a huge, at all, amount on your grade.
Ms. Melman?
I'm not opposed to homework. Not a lot of homework, but I agree with Carolyn that it should be to refresh and strengthen, especially in math. You need to work on those skills. And Virginia Beach City Public Schools has made some grave mistakes in the area of mathematics. A number of years ago, there was a math program adopted called Everyday Math, which was an absolute nightmare. It presented math in the most horrific way possible, and it gave parents the opportunity to not be able to help their children at home with math. It was, the children were told, and I'm speaking gospel here, as I was one of the teachers that had to tell my students, you cannot learn your mom and dad's way to do math. It's wrong. If this is our way, don't ask your parents for help. So I'm really focused on the curriculum and making sure that our curriculum is square for these kids.
Mr. Steinway?
So it's a two-question part, I guess, two-part question. The first part, of course, is how we're preparing with international children. I've traveled extensively internationally, and I still even struggle with really seeing how the measurements go apples to apples. So I'm not sure if that measurement is totally accurate, but I absolutely do believe that we need to be focusing on math and science, and we need to be setting the bar higher, no matter who we try to compare ourselves to. We need to be improving, and I think that's what we need to be focusing on. With regards to the homework, this is just a pure personal opinion. It should be left up to administration, but I think it depends really on if you're going into an AP class and you're looking to get into college, then that homework is going to help prepare you, because I know what I was spending after I left class in college. I got crushed. It was a lot of time. But I don't believe that's for every class and every student, and I believe the students need extracurricular activities to enjoy and grow also.
Ms. Ryan?
I suppose what I could add to the discussion, homework, I think students should be accountable, and there's been a lot of press coverage in the past few years on the districts here and who's making the kids accountable for homework and who's excusing it. So I'm all for the expectation that they do suffer the consequences if they don't do homework. It's part of what they're expected to learn to enter the working world. And what intrigues me about homework now is a recent trend now, the flipped classroom, where the homework time depending on the subject, it's more conducive with certain subjects than others, but the homework time at home is listening to a teacher explain the lesson, and then the classroom time is spent with the teacher. Gee, what did I miss? What did I get out of it? What do I still need to work on? It's fascinating to me, and again, it works better with certain subject areas than others.
Ms. Thompson?
I'm concerned about the homework policy. I hear parents and teachers, concerned about the amount of homework and the things that are required from children at home. And sometimes we make assumptions that every child's home is like our home, and that's not a good assumption to make. So not all children have computer access. They don't have access to parents in the evenings. All those kinds of things come into play. I do understand that homework is good for practice, for review, and it should be in place. But we are in the 21st century, and I don't know if we can really determine what was truly a child's work versus the internet's work. And so I think that while we can encourage and keep homework in place, we have to remember that we don't want to make that a part or a huge part of their grade. That homework for completion, but homework for grading, I'm not so certain. But I do know that we need to review our homework policy carefully. Remember that we are in the 21st century, that we have students and children who are equity is not always there.
Mr. Rumpke?
Thank you. The board policy is really a guiding policy. It's not one in which, while there are some hard numbers in there, it's a guiding document. homework is best determined right next to the student by the teacher who's sitting in class with the student. She knows, he knows what their class needs, what needs reinforcement, and there are certain subjects where one student with all of the same resources will finish a homework assignment in 15 minutes, and another student will spend 2 hours working on that homework assignment. And I've been on both sides of those with my kids, with the same class, subject matter, same teachers. It's just each child learns a little differently. So when we talk about homework, we need to kind of bring some framework to that. There was a reference to everyday math as it relates to homework, and yes, math needs repetition. Everyday math is really not an issue because we don't use it anymore. This board got rid of it.
Mr. Kelly?
Well, personally, I don't like homework, but that probably goes back to when I was a kid. I didn't like homework very much. But I believe that there should be some, but it needs to be reinforcement at home for the work you did in the schools. I always go back to the fact that I know it's a guiding policy, but policies are only as good as they are enforced. And sometimes if we don't enforce the policy, then one teacher decides way more than the other. So we probably need to tighten up at least some guidelines that will be enforceable. When we go to talk about science and math scores internationally, you do hear a lot of people say it's apples. It's not apples to apples. Well, actually, they've gotten a lot better at that, and it's very close. And I usually agree with Carolyn on almost all issues, but this is one I don't. The comparisons that they do now are very close to being apples to apples, and we still are trailing behind in our math scores. One of the reasons I think is what Greg was saying about the sciences. We're the only industrial nation that teaches biology, then chemistry, then physics. Most everybody else at the high school level teaches an introductory physics, then chemistry, biology. Math sciences first, they go with math, brings up your math scores.
Next question, Ms. Melnick will start off with. What can be done to increase minority participation in the gifted programs and academies?
That came up at our APAC interview too, and you know what? I don't know that I know exactly the answer to that, and I'm sorry about that. I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Strangways?
So that it did come up in the African American Political Council question. And so I actually followed up with them, Davis, a little bit on how the qualifications are defined and then how the selection is made. So from the surface, the way we qualify students and the way we choose students is very factual and very straightforward. But there seems to be a discrepancy there. So I don't know what the discrepancy is. There does seem to be a discrepancy. But what we're doing in the school system and how we go about this seems to be the best method possible. So we do need to stay on this, dive deeper further into this issue and question this more.
Ms. Ryan?
The two parts, I guess, with regard, was one part, sir, about the academies?
I'll repeat the question. What can be done to increase minority participation in the gifted programs and academies?
Okay. With regard to the high school academies, I would just focus on middle school, the importance of middle school counseling. It's incumbent upon them to make all the students aware of these opportunities and the parents as well. With regard to gifted, I've been through this with my children. Gifted identification is a very hot button issue. And it's supposed to be a holistic process. I mean, this is governed by state regulation, and it often is not. If it's just limited to test scores, which may favor some kids over others, there are other factors that are supposed to go into the analysis, so I encourage any parent who's addressing this issue to just be aware of that and to be sure that all these factors are being taken into account.
Ms. Thompson?
I'm going to stand up on this one. Because I think you just said the fox in the hen house.
You might. Go ahead.
But the fox in the hen house on this one. I was a part of the assessment process for gifted education, and they let me do that for a while, and then they put me off of that because I really had a problem with the way that children were being identified. And when we rely only on test scores from biased tests, then we're going to get the kind of children that we have in gifted education. What we've got to do is move to a portfolio assessment, to a more holistic way to identify children, to make sure that the tests that we're using are totally non-biased, And that's been our biggest concern. As the guidance director and admissions officer at Kemp's Landing, it would grieve me to see African-American children come before the identification committee with everything in place except for that one test score. And they would decline admission in Kemp's Landing, or they would decline the gifted status. So we've got to look back at that whole process again.
Mr. Brunke?
Thank you. In addition to some of the items Ms. Thompson identified, I want to also point out that it's about access and points of entry. One of the things we did on the school board, particularly in the gifted program in elementary school, was recognize that students were entering the gifted program in second grade and there was a finite number of seats available. And if you weren't identified in second grade, or frankly just didn't know about it in second grade, your options to get into the gifted program required that somebody left the gifted program because of the number of seats available. So one of the things that we did a couple of years ago on the board was increase the number of seats strategically at different points during that pathway, so that there would be multiple entry points and new opportunities for fresh students to come in who weren't in before without having to wait. The other thing we have to talk about is access. Things like bus transportation. I've been known to mentor young African-American kids and get in my car and drive 45 minutes at 6 o'clock in the morning because Mrs. Bus calls me on the cell phone and says, "Hey, Bill," he calls me Bill, "I missed my bus, man, could you come pick me up because I don't have any other way to get to school?" You know, and as a community, we have to step up and take that responsibility as well.
Mr. Kelly?
Maureen, I agree that we need to do a thorough review of how we identify students in the gifted program. Testing alone is not the only way. I like the idea of a portfolio base, and it needs to be blind, so that when you're selecting students, you don't know by the name or anything what you might think their ethnicity is. Regarding the high school academy programs, you got to go get them, principals. Bottom line, that's it. I was a principal of Lynnhaven Middle School. When I went through my 6th grade math classes, I noticed something. All of a sudden, some of the classes were all white kids except for maybe one black kid. And I knew we had a 20% population of minorities. So I said, well, what's going on here? Went back and looked at the schedule, realized those were my advanced math classes. My advanced classes were significantly disproportionate to white students. So I went up to the schools, the feeder schools, the 5th grade, met with all the 5th grade teachers that were primarily minority, and I said, look, you guys have got to look at the kids again and send me your top kids. It's much easier to get them in the advanced and then slide them back if they're having trouble, and we very rarely slid them back. But you got to go get them. That's the responsibility of principals.
Ms. Williams?
As far as the gifted programs, we do test everyone at a certain grade level, and we have expanded that, as Mr. Brunke says. It is blind. The committee does not know who the application is, who the applicant or anything, and it's a whole committee, it's just not one person. But I do think that we can expand on that to do a more holistic approach, as Ms. Thompson said down there. The academies are completely different because, of course, you don't have to be gifted to be in an academy. Right now, we have the charter school at Green Run that's completely done by lottery, so you know anybody and everybody has a equally fair chance. But the bottom line is access and education to let these kids know that they have the options. And if the parents, for whatever reason, aren't engaged, at no fault of theirs or at fault of theirs, whatever reason, we need to get out in communities, go to churches, go to rec centers, and put this out that when you're in 8th grade, or you know, look for the academies. I went to the academy night the other night.
Ms. Thompson, would you want to take 30 seconds to reflect what you just said?
I do have to say this, that the gifted identification process is not blind. That means that we do see the name, address, and all the information, the demographics on every child, on every application. The race or ethnicity of the child is not identified. But we do get the demographics of every child who comes through the gifted identification process. I'm not talking about application for the academies.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Next question, Mr. Strangways, you'll start this question off. Do community schools teach cursive writing? If yes or no, if one cannot write cursive, can they really read cursive?
So my sons are in 5th and 7th grade. Neither can write and neither can read cursive. So there's the answer to what they're doing. The question really becomes, is cursive part of our future, and how much time do we really have in the school systems? And of all items that I want my children reading, yeah, I'd love for them to be able to read cursive, but given the time constraints of school systems nowadays, that may just have to fall back.
Ms. Ryan?
Well,
Ms. Thompson?
Yeah, I do believe that there is still cursive writing being taught in the classroom. It may not be a handwriting class, but they do encourage cursive writing. But we are in the 21st century, and kids pull out their computer keyboards and that's really, we need to spend more time on keyboarding probably than cursive writing. I do know that we encourage 21st century skills. That's what we want to continue to encourage. We have children who don't know what a handwriting is. They don't even know what that is because that's all they know how to swipe. And so we've got to realize that we have 21st century skills, we have 21st century students, and I'm sure that we will keep our emphasis on that, making sure that every child is prepared for their world and have those multiple pathways to success. I love that. Our superintendent has told us that. It's perfect that we prepare children not just for college, but for the world of work, for military, and all of that. So I know that's what our emphasis is on 21st century skills.
Mr. Bronte?
Thank you. We do teach cursive, nobody uses it. It is something we teach, we still do, yes. Most people think we don't because, well, kids don't write in cursive these days, as has been said many times. I'm not sure we can add much more. I was trying to think about the last time I wrote in cursive. And honestly, I don't remember, other than signing my name, and that doesn't look like cursive anymore either.
Mr. Kelly?
I print everything, and it's messy, so if I wrote in cursive, it would be a problem. Yeah, we teach cursive, and we do leave it a lot up to the teacher's discretion these days. I will say that as an aspiring teacher, all the way back in the 80s, I had to learn how to write cursive again from 5th grade, and it was very struggling, but I had to do it. And I haven't used it since I started, when I started my early teachings. So we've de-emphasized it. I think it is a lost art and a skill, but I don't think it's going to be stressed more in the future.
Ms. Williams?
Well, I have to comment, my dad is a graduate from MIT. He still uses a slide rule, and he has never written cursive a day in his life. But anyway, that's an engineer. We do teach it. In fact, kindergarten, some of our teachers do the looping on the regular letters. That's kind of the segue between cursive writing. It's really up to the teacher, and it has been de-emphasized because of 21st century skills and because it's not used as much. Obviously, there needs to be a balance. I still think that it needs to be taught. I still think it would be horrible if a student does not know how to sign their name. I would say on a check, but checks aren't used anymore. But obviously you have to be able to sign your name. But it is being taught, but it's up to the teacher, and it's not a skill that was as important as it was in my day or any of our days. So I think there's a good balance there.
Ms. Melman?
We do not teach cursive. We teach the Demillion handwriting in 1st grade, kindergarten in 1st grade, it does. And the purpose of Demillion, as opposed to the very square Palmer method, the Demillion method, it does have little curves that are supposed to lead you into handwriting. They do not teach it. They don't have time to teach it because we're teaching to the test. We're teaching to the SOL. So handwriting has disappeared. My son cannot sign his name. He's in 7th grade. He has no idea how to make a capital G. My fault, we're working on it. Cursive is not, grammar is not, spelling, vocabulary, basic things that we learn in elementary have disappeared.
Okay, that concludes the question and answer period of this debate or forum. We're now going to go to the 1-minute close, and we're going to start with Ms. Melman.
So, I feel that some members of our current board, maybe I've said this, have lost sight of the true meaning of a school board, and I mean that. When elected, you're entrusted to make decisions for our treasured institution, the public school system. And I believe it's the job of the school board to create a strong bond with the community and develop a level of trust and understanding. I also think it's imperative that all employees of Virginia Beach City Public Schools feel a level of respect and support, as they are truly the direct link to our kids, from the school bus driver to the teacher and everybody in between. These principles have been broken. We've given people plenty of opportunities to make a difference, and they have